Welcome to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm Melissa Joy, a certified financial planner and the founder of Pearl Planning. My goal is to help you streamline and organize your finances, navigate big money decisions with confidence, and be strategic in order to grow your wealth. As a woman, you work hard for your money, and I'm here to help you make the most of it. Now, let's get into the show. Welcome back to the Women's Money Wisdom Podcast. There's a few guests that we have on here more frequently than most, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by a fellow certified financial planner who might be our most frequent guest, Ann Garcia. Ann is an expert on how to pay for college for your kids. In fact, that's the name of her book, How to Pay for College. And she's also a practicing certified financial planner who advises families on all sorts of things, including paying for college. Welcome back to the podcast, Ann.
Thank you so much for having me back.
Well, I just appreciate the excuse to catch up with you. We're friends as well. But there's a lot of new news on the landscape when it comes to ways to save for college. And also, we have this brand new account type, the Trump account. And so I thought it would be great because those Trump accounts actually are not yet investable, but near to be investable. And so I thought we could bring in our resident expert to talk about everything you need to know about Trump accounts and then a little bit more about the college savings landscape nowadays. So here you are. Thanks for coming.
My pleasure.
Okay, so you already have established yourself for our repeat listeners as our expert when it comes to college. Now we have this new account type. Can you tell us what it is and what it means to the best of your knowledge thus far?
Yeah, and these are a little new, so it's likely that some of the details will change over time. But the Trump account is it's what's called a 530A account, and that is a form of IRA that you can open for a child who doesn't have any earnings. So for a typical IRA, in order to make contributions, you have to have earnings. But for these, anyone under age 18 can receive contributions.
Okay.
So the way
Go ahead.
the way the accounts work is um, families can contribute, and then there are also some government and foundation contributions. So any child born in 2025 or 2026 who opens the account will get $1,000 deposited on their behalf into the account. In addition, um, the Dells have committed to contributing $250 to every account for a child who lives in a child 10 and under who lives in a zip code where the median household income is $75,000 or less.
And then there have been some other intent to give. So there's maybe over time going to be some money that's there on the table if you administratively can pull it together to get the account open. Do the accounts automatically get funded if the parents don't establish the account?
You have to establish the account in order for it to get funded. But if you establish the account, you will automatically get all the funding that you're entitled to. So once you've established the account, you do not have to go and request the $1,000 that the federal government is contributing or the $250 that the Dells are contributing. You just have to have the account open. And it's pretty straightforward to open it. I know when this runs, it'll be past tax season. You can file the form when you file your taxes, and in fact, when you did your taxes, if you had an eligible child, chances are good that your CPA asked you to complete the form. But it's just IRS form 4547 that you file in order to open the account.
And I know in some parts of our local county, there is eligibility for the Dell contribution. Is there an easy way to look that up?
You can just look up household income for your zip code,
Got
and
it.
and there's a census webpage
Details.
that it'll take you to that tells you that. I mean, the majority of households are going to be eligible. So this has nothing to do with your own family's income. It has to do with your zip code's average income.
Got it. And I assume that free money that would also would otherwise not be there is, at least to me, a good thing.
Absolutely.
How about for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you should take all the free money that you're eligible for. Now, these accounts, there's some unique features to them. So, they are technically an IRA, which means that they are for retirement. What happens is you can fund it up until the child is 18. When they turn 18, it just converts to a traditional IRA.
Got it.
Um, and at that point, a traditional IRA, you can take contributions out when you're 59 and a half or older. However, there are two exceptions for these accounts. The first exception is to pay for college, and the second exception is purchase of a first home.
Got it. So these kids, babies today, are going to have automatically have funds that are gonna be theirs that they can do what they want with, but in order to avoid a penalty, they will need to use it in, contemporary sense of an 18 to 22-year-old, either to pay for college or to buy a house. Otherwise, it's kind of a retirement fund with a
Otherwise,
penalty
it's a
if you
retirement
access it.
fund. Yeah, otherwise it's a retirement fund. And now the thing to remember about these accounts, and this comes into play when you think of, do I put my own money into that? Because that's a different question from, do I open the account? Open the account, take the free money that you're entitled to. When it comes to putting your own money in, it's really important to think about what you're actually going to use this for. Now, one of the challenges with using this as a college savings account is that a child who's a dependent on your tax return is going to be subject to the kiddie tax if they take money out of this account, barring changes in tax legislation. So this is pre-tax money, and dependents are not allowed to have too much unearned income. Otherwise, if they're above a certain threshold, which is about $2,500, then that money gets taxed at their parents' rate. So that makes it not such a great account for college savings.
And just for reference, I think that kiddie tax also applies for your UTMAs and UGMAs if
Correct.
there's enough taxable events, which is an entirely additional conversation, but just something to keep in the back of your mind.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is not the account that you want to load up to pay for college. Two reasons for that. One being the kiddie tax, with the other being that it's taxable income when the person takes it out, even if they're not subject to the kiddie tax versus a 529, which is tax free. So, that $1,000 initial deposit is probably going to be worth, depending on how it's invested, about $3,500 when the kid is college age. Now, if they take that out and it's taxed at your rate, you might have $2,500 ultimately to spend for college. If you put $1,000 into your 529 and it's now $3,500, you have $3,500 available to pay for college.
Got it. For the FAFSA funding rules as are stated today, would this money be considered the same in terms of the ability to fund college when it's in the kid's name as a 529 asset?
No, because it's a retirement account, it wouldn't count as an asset, but when you take it out, it counts as income.
Got it. And then what are the contribution
Income is
limits?
much more income
Yeah.
is much more significant on the FAFSA than our assets.
Understood. So what are the contribution limits then? We've said what you may receive, not from family money, but what additional limitations are there if you were saving in all of the other places, which we're going to talk about in a minute? Like, where do we put this on the ranking of where you want to put money?
Yeah.
Um,
So you can contribute $5,000 a year to these accounts. Now, this is not a deductible contribution. It's an after-tax contribution that then goes into a pre-tax account. So all that means is that when you take the money out, the growth in it is subject to tax, whereas your original contributions aren't taxable. The $1,000 you get from the government, any foundation money that you get, that's all pre-tax, and that is 100% taxable to you.
And one similarity I see between this program, or just an echo, in 529s, each state kind of deems certain financial institutions to be their guy or girl for the financial institution that they'll set up their 529 accounts. It's not only always only one. Oftentimes there's an advisor sold 529, which compensates a financial advisor, as well as one that's direct sold. Um, in the federal Trump accounts, there are certain financial institutions that will receive the right to offer these accounts. Is that correct?
That is correct. Now the accounts don't get opened until July 4th of this year, so I have a feeling there's gonna be a lot of different,
Figuring out.
um, if we told you who was doing it now, it might be a completely different list by then.
Yes. So certain institutions have initially been named recently, but this is an evolving process and story. And
Yeah.
similar to, like uses of 529s, the ability to um I think of the ability to convert 529s to Roth. It's sometimes some of the rules and how things work are a figure out as you go,
Mhm.
because it is a new program. And so oftentimes there will be, kind of new interpretations, new guidance, etc. And so you need to sometimes be comfortable with an answer is, we don't know yet.
Yeah. The important thing is that the main investing rules in this is that it has to the accounts can only use low cost, broadly diversified funds. So you can't invest in crypto, you can't invest in alts, you can't invest in
Single
individual
stocks.
stocks.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a 401k or a 529 where there is a set investment menu.
And we like that, I think.
I think simplicity is really a virtue in financial things.
So I'm sure because you are the college financial expert and thus also, like money and kids investment accounts, you're getting asked, what do you think about these accounts? So what are some of the bullet points of, kind of how you're thinking about the accounts, and how you're telling other people who may have children eligible for these accounts to think of them?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. One is take all the free money that you're entitled to. Like we were saying before,
Yeah.
free money is free money. If your child was eligible for the $1,000 initial deposit and they left it there until they retired, when they're 65, that's going to be something like 80 to $100,000 that they'll have if they just left it alone and let it grow. If they're gonna buy a house when they're 30, maybe it's maybe it's $15,000, maybe it's $10,000. It's not gonna be a significant amount of money for college, and again, as a college student, there are limitations in the withdrawals. But, this is money that can grow to a meaningful number if it's just left alone and if all you do is take the free money. When it comes to your own money, in most cases, this is not gonna be the best place to put it. If you're thinking about money for college, a 529 is a much better place to put this money because that growth is tax-free and the withdrawal is tax-free. So you'll simply have more money if you put it in a 529. And most of us live in states where if we have state income tax, we're eligible for a state tax benefit for the contribution. So that makes a contribution to a 529 much more valuable for college purposes than a contribution to a Trump account.
Got it. And then, there are I we shared a couple messages when now there's going to be articles coming about strategy, which I think is great. And I've gotten questions about the Trump accounts as well. But there was one article that really caught my attention because the headline is just phenomenal. It was published by the Wall Street Journal. I'll try to put a gifted link into the show notes so that you can read the article. But I'm reading the title: "The Hack That Turns Trump Accounts into Multi-Million Dollar Tax-Free Nest Eggs." And I'm just like, wow, that sounds appealing. Tell me more. So we both read the article. What are your thoughts about, this is basically saying you should really consider just jamming more money in there, because this you can kind of supercharge this type of account. Tell me what you think.
Right. And so just the summary of the article is this. If you contributed the $5,000 to this account every year until your child turns 18, and then And then when they turn 24 and are no longer subject to the kiddie tax, you convert that to a Roth IRA. You have money somewhere else to pay for the taxes, which I think in the article they estimated would be around $40,000 to do this Roth conversion. Now the child has this gigantic Roth IRA that's going to grow tax free until they retire, and they'll have $3 million dollars in a Roth IRA when they retire, which that sounds phenomenal, doesn't it?
Sounds good to me.
So let's think this through though, because if you're going to be doing that, this assumes that you're already maxing out retirement, that you're already funding college somewhere else. So this is a strategy that works for a family that maybe is saving $100,000 a year, right? Because you've got
You're definitely going to a
maxed
higher
out,
tax bracket
maxed
family
out
or
retirement accounts.
yeah.
Um, a couple things to think about. Um, One is that family, let's say you have 2 parents who are maxing out retirement every year for their entire careers. Their 401ks alone are going to be worth somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to $6 million when they retire each. So, they already have, somewhere between 8 and 12, let's just say for the sake of easy math, $10 million of retirement assets. That means that it's highly likely that they have a surplus that this child is going to inherit somewhere around the time when they retire. So, is that $3 million Roth IRA when they retire the most meaningful way that you can build wealth for them? Because you do have alternatives to the Trump accounts. You could fund a UTMA account for the child. You get that same growth, if you're doing $5,000 a year into a UTMA account, when the child's 24, 28, 30, if they wanted to buy a house, all that money is available to them then. If they wanted to take time off when they have kids, that money is available to supplement their income. That money can also be set aside for the long term if they choose to do so. You can also, as part of that strategy, as soon as they start working, instead of funding the UTMA, then you start funding the Roth IRA, and then you start building up those Roth assets at an early age where they can compound and grow for decades at a time. Any of these strategies don't involve paying $40,000 in taxes when they're 24 to convert these assets into Roth, and they give the child a far higher level of flexibility with what they do with that money. So I think when you're thinking about, okay, I want to save for long term for my child, think about the points in their life when that money is going to be most meaningful. What are the things that you most want to help them do? Do you want them to have $3 million at a time when you're not going to be around to enjoy it with them, most likely? And where they're probably going to be receiving other assets from you? Or do you want them to have meaningful amounts of money over the course of their adulthood that can be used for a variety of purposes or set aside for retirement?
I love that analysis, and I think obviously there's a level of complexity where, just each point of optionality along the way, I'm thinking, okay, if you're gifting to your kids otherwise, there is a limitation on how much you can gift without exceeding many of these strategies, and this one in particular is definitely most likely set up for families in, the at least the top 5% in assets or income, for the typical American, and so every great idea has a place, I think, and also there would be some serious considerations about alternative strategies in some cases. And also, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. So some people may absolutely love these Trump accounts, and for others, there may be a preference for different strategies.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things to think about with the Trump accounts is they will generate future tax revenue. And so you don't get a tax savings now. Do you want to create a tax liability for your child in the future?
Which is also something to consider because, you have the Congressional Budget Office whenever you're doing analysis of any sort of, budget implemented policy, and so that had to be a factor and consideration in how the accounts were set up.
Absolutely.
Okay, so there's also been another attention-grabbing headline if you're a nerd on finance like me. The other one that we've recently
People in our
discussed,
world talk about this all the time, right?
yeah, is, a recent article, which I'll also try to have a gift link. It was published March 31st in the Wall Street Journal. The financial planning expert who's boycotting 529s for his kids. And it features conversations about David Blanchett and his personal financial strategies for himself and his kids. He's a well known financial planning expert who I have always found to be informative when it comes to planning strategies. I think he really knows what he's doing. But I have some strong opinions about this article in particular. Did you read the article?
I did, yeah.
So he's basically laying out like, "Hey, I want optionality and I'm not sure if we'll need 529 savings. And we also may choose to invest in my wife's entrepreneurial veterinary practice. I just want to have choices as to where I put my money. And so I'm not saving in 529s. And even though I know what they are, and, I'm a financial planning expert, which is great point of view. And then it compares with his brother who, um, is saving in 529s, and I think it's a great read.
Yeah,
Um
yeah. I think stuff like this, it's really helpful for how you think about what you're doing with your money.
Yeah,
It's not necessarily what you wanna do with your money. Because to me, there was a giant red flag in that article, and that was where he talked about, "We might use it for my wife's veterinary practice."
yeah.
Well, so let's say you do, what's left for college? How do you explain to your kids, "Well, sorry, we don't have college money, but mom's got a great business over here."
Well, I do think, like, hey, if you have the philosophy that some families I meet with, and it is not my job to change their mind necessarily, it's my job to be inquisitive. Some families absolutely say we had to sweat equity is what got us through school. We did take out student loans, and philosophically, I'm opposed to planning to pay for my kids' school. And sometimes there's 2 members of a household, 2 financial decision makers with differing views on how much you should pay for college. That is a really important conversation to have up front.
Mhm.
So, not everybody is, gonna have the same philosophy. I think both of us have a philosophy that is, like, if you have the opportunity to prepare to pay, then why not plan? But the thing that stuck out to me too is, like, I would give that advice with a huge grain of salt because David has all of the tools to assess the risks of putting money into different pools and the optionality that and he
Literally had a class.
knows or has a higher probability of it's more probable that if he intends to set aside money elsewhere that that money ends up being set aside elsewhere versus the average American, where if you don't intentionally make the time and space to save for college, when that bill comes up, you do not have room in your household budget to pay for it. So
100%. Yep.
I just like a retirement account, if you don't start, saving early, I get why if he came into my office and said, "This is my plan and this is why," I would be like, you do you because you know the cost benefit analysis, and we
Yeah.
might, discuss
And
some
my
options.
job is along the way to make sure that that portion that's supposed
Yeah.
to be for college remains there and accessible to your kids.
Yeah, and if you're working with a financial planner, they are in all likelihood, showing you in software a future liability for your intention to pay for college. And they are having that conversation along the way if you're not preparing for it. But I think for the typical American or even perhaps the typical Wall Street Journal reader, there is not nearly as much probability that you would end up having the pools of money that you anticipate you would have
Mhm.
to figure it out later. And
Yeah.
so that is a huge gap in terms of the typical investor's behavior versus someone who is so steeped in the rigors of financial planning and technical financial analysis.
Absolutely. And I would say a couple of things to that too. One is that I have never met a parent of an 18-year-old who regretted having money in a 529.
Same. And it's
I have
very
met
it's
many who regretted not having money 529.
it's very flexible. Like, there are a
Mhm.
lot of options, for you. Of course, the money is typically intended for college, but it actually has its own great estate planning considerations and generational wealth transfer, options, and it's actually not, like, if, the kid just ran away and never said hi again, it's not like you didn't have options to kind of claw that money back with
Yeah,
some
it's not
costs, but
yeah. Well, um, a couple of other things about that. One is almost 70% of Americans go on to some form of formal schooling after high school. And so if you are in the cohort of Americans that has the capacity to save for college, your kids' odds of going to college are even higher than 70%. Because once you slice and dice into people who have gone to college, people who have pursued graduate degrees, each of those, you're gradually stepping up the chain of likelihood that your child does have some form of formal schooling um, after high school. The other thing is to not do it right at the start where you get the biggest benefit out of that tax-free growth is, is kind of shooting yourself in the foot. I mean, the simple fact is tax-free savings like a 529 means you have more money available when the time comes to spend it than if you put it in a taxable account.
so true. So, I mean, we've discussed in previous episodes, I think we both have a bias where, in our world with our clients, we've seen good outcomes when it came to 529 savings to assist with paying for college. And not every family can start to make, five to $10,000 contributions when their kids are in diapers because the cost of childcare is pretty much like approaching the cost of higher ed. Um, but or and I think it's kind of the articles that we're referencing are speaking to a very small percentage of the general population, even a small percentage of Wall Street Journal readership. And so you need to take everything with a grain of salt. And as always, personalized advice, which includes, and conversations about your perspectives and your family values, as well as your personal financial situation, is always, more capable of tailoring to your needs than a general article from a financial expert.
I think too, when it comes to finance, one of the best pieces of financial advice is from Morgan Housel in The Psychology of Money. And his advice was the best investment strategy is shut up and wait.
Mm.
So, put your money in the account, leave it there and let it grow. And 529s are a great shut up and wait tool for investing.
In
You know,
fact, they were built to have very low, transactions, few transactions. Initially, it was only 1 a year, and, they do offer that, like, just, like, fix and forget it recipe in many cases, so,
I mean, you
keep
and
that
I
in
are
mind.
both parents and we've been through this before. When you have so much of your life as a family is in triage mode, right? There's the science fair project and there's the this and there's somebody needs physical therapy and then we got braces and we got, there's just always something. Life is constantly in triage mode and finances oftentimes don't reach that triage level until something happens that they need to be. So to me, one of the most important things that you can do for your long-term and near-term financial security is automate as much of your financial life as possible. That means automate your bill pay, automate your savings, automate your 401k contributions, your 529 contributions, and all of that stuff so that that doesn't get into triage mode.
Absolutely. In fact, it's the antidote to triage mode. And because I'm sure you're the same way, we're working with people who are peers who are in that messy money middle where you're caring for your parents' situation. Your kids have maybe maybe they don't need as much TLC day to day, but they're when a kid has an issue, it's a bigger issue or perhaps more costly. And then the more you simplify and have good financial hygiene, for lack of a better word, the easier it is to create space and time for the complexity where it represents itself in your life, in this stage of life.
Yeah. That being said, to your original point, pick something that works for you and just do it. And maybe
Absolutely.
it's not a 529, maybe it is a brokerage account, but make sure you've got that monthly contribution set up so that account grows. If
Yeah,
it's your personal, same thing. Just make sure.
I have
Um,
no issues with David's strategy. I I I definitely would encourage people to, I would say, "Oh, that's interesting," and I get that for you, but I wouldn't, publish a book with that as a singular strategy because of some other behavioral outcomes. Is there is there anything else that people that's evolving or change? I mean, I know there's so much, but any high level bullet points that you think people should be aware of when it comes to paying for college and finances for emerging adults?
yeah. So I would say, on the paying for college front, the most important financial thing you'll do for college is not financial at all. It's talking with your kids about your
Mm-mm.
expectations and your budget for college. And doing that at an early enough age where you can be the one who's framing their thinking about it as opposed to their friends framing their thinking about
Or
it,
Instagram
or
or
Instagram
TikTok.
or any of those places, because college is available at every price point out there. There are great outcomes to be had at every price point out there. Where families get into trouble is when the kids take on the narrative themselves and the parents don't get out in front of that. So I would say that's
Absolutely.
my number one bullet point for people thinking about college. I think, for young adults who are just getting started, I mean, when we're talking about, say, people, so your kids' age, middle
Mhm.
school, high school, I think one of the big stumbling points that we have in talking about money for with our kids is thinking that either A, we have to teach them some grand lesson about investing, or B, thinking that we have to share information that we think is private. You don't need
Mhm.
to tell your kids your salary. You don't need to tell your kids the difference between ETFs and mutual funds. What's really helpful, in terms of money conversations to get started with is talking about what you spend money on and why. We spend money on family vacations because we value that time we have together away from the pressures of our day-to-day life.
I love that.
And as a result, we don't spend money on these other things because that's our focus, and that's important to us. So, just talking about money from a non-defensive, here are things I value that money helps me get to, I think, takes a lot of the edge off of having those conversations. As your kids get older, so yours are high school, middle school, mine
Yep.
are early career, making sure that they automate those really important financial tasks, getting set up with their 401(k) when they start a job, contributing to a Roth IRA. Any of those things that you can help them with are great to do. And in fact, a great thing is to open that Roth IRA when they're still in high school and get their first summer job and get some money into it so that when they become an adult, that account's already there and it's just a matter of helping them get the money into it as opposed to helping them actually get it open.
Yep. My son has had a couple jobs in the past year, and, so we did his tax return, his second ever tax return, this year, and took the amount he'd earned, which was less than definitely less than the max, and contributed to a Roth, so now he'll have it was a gift from full disclosure from me to, match whatever he earned, because trust me,
The
we will be
16-year-old
working on
won't be
cash
interested
flow.
in saving for retirement.
No. And, so that but we do have a minor Roth IRA where I'm the custodian, he is, the account owner, it's his money, but until he's 18, I sign the contracts, And so that is depending on the family, a lower cost way to have some money lessons. And also, I think like you don't have to give numbers, but you can say like, hey, it's really fortunate that we got to have this recent spring break, or hey, our family's making sacrifices because of X, Y, or Z, because mom or dad don't work, or we're really saving for college, and we didn't have generational wealth to pay for it, or, "Hey, did you notice the price of that when we filled up gas was this?" Like, there's so many little moments to integrate financial and money conversations, and every person has their strengths and weaknesses. Like, I have a kid that's great at math and, spends every dollar he makes, and I have another kid that spends less and, math's more challenging, and so, um, addressing and kind of inserting little lessons. It doesn't have to be a 3-hour lecture in order to start to share.
Yeah. Yeah, and don't let those big things get in the way of the little things, because the little things are where we start building the knowledge and building the foundation of our future financial lives. And to me, a big part of having a healthy relationship with money is thinking about how it helps you do the things that are important to you, as opposed
Absolutely.
to how am I gonna get the biggest pile of it.
For sure. I think that money is a resource to invest in your life. Certainly, you can't have too little because that creates its own vulnerabilities, insecurities, and, there's a certain minimum threshold that you have to have. Interestingly, your minimum threshold may be different than mine. But absolutely, like teaching people to have a healthy relationship with money where it's not hoarding it and it's also not spending it recklessly is a lifetime learning lesson, right?
Mhm. And well, balance is not about everything being level all the time. Balance is that there's ups and downs and you're able to recover from them.
And gosh knows that I had plenty of my own financial lessons, so that were the school of hard knocks in my early adult era. And thank you so much for coming on again.
Oh my
I
gosh, thank you
Your
for having
episodes
me.
are always so popular. How can people find you and find out more, both for college specifically, but also the services you provide for general financial planning?
Yeah, two ways to find me. My website is howtopayforcollege.com. And that's also the title of my book. So either of those will get you there, and you can contact me through the website. And then I am an advisor with the Mather Group, and you can contact me there at themathergroup.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and I'm sure you'll be back again with another emerging conversation on how to pay for college and the like.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Women's Money Wisdom podcast. If you found value in this episode, the best way that you can support the podcast is to forward an episode to a friend or leave a review. Go to proplan.com and the podcast link to get all the resources and links mentioned. This presentation by Pro Planning is intended for general information purposes only. No portion of this presentation serves as a receipt of or a substitute for personal investment advice from Pro Planning or any other investment professional of your choosing. Copies of Pro Planning's current written disclosure brochure and Form CRS discussing our advisory services and fees are available upon request or on our website platform at pearlplan.com. The information that we share is meant to educate and inspire, not serve as personalized financial advice. Everyone's situation is unique, so be sure to consult with your own financial professional for guidance that fits your life. And just so you know, the opinions shared in this podcast are Melissa's own and those of her guests. They don't necessarily represent any organizations with which Melissa is affiliated. For more important disclosures, please go to our webpage at pearlplan.com.